On August 10th, 1996, a family of three known as the Duke family went out on a lovely trip to Green River, Wyoming. Unfortunately, this lovely family trip soon turned into a terrible tragedy that left investigators in shock as they struggled to uncover the mystery behind it. 22-year-old Liana Duke and her 5-year-old son Eric tragically fell from a 200-feet cliff in Sweetwater County. Liana's husband and Eric's father, Mr. James Robert Bob Duke, reported the incident to the authorities, but when the officers arrived, it was too late. As investigations began, a detective named Mon Meekum believed strongly that the deaths of Liana Duke and her son were not accidents. However, to prove it, he needed to answer two questions. Who would want to kill the young mother and her child, and what could they gain from their deaths? Hello everyone, welcome to Bizarre Cases. I'm Jerry, and today we are going to explore the twisted case of Bob Duke, unveiling the mystery behind the terrible incident. With that said, let's begin the story. It all started in Green River, a beautiful city in the state of Wyoming with rivers, wildlife, and big cliffs. Green River is home to about 11,825 people, and its main town, Sweetwater County, is precisely where our story begins. Born on January 4th, 1974, as Liana Davidson to Ralph Wayne Davidson and Rosalie West Davidson, Liana was a quiet and smart child who excelled academically. She later grew up to become a beautiful young woman with long brown hair. Although Liana had plans to finish high school and go to college, her plans changed when she met Robert Bob Duke at a very tender age. They two started dating when Liana turned 17 and spent most of their time together. Liana got pregnant when she was still very young, and she was scared to tell her parents, who happened to be Mormons. Eventually, they found out, and both sets of parents wanted Liana and Bob to do the right thing. So, after they both graduated from high school, they decided to get married. On May 25th, 1991, Liana and Bob finally got married. Even though Liana wasn't going to college anymore, she had accepted the fact that she was going to have a baby. Soon after, they got married. They had their son, Eric Robert Duke, on August 8th, 1991. Despite being young, Liana was a good mom. She took care of Eric and their home while Bob went to work. In her free time, she enjoyed making crafts and decorating their house with homemade items. Liana dreamed of opening her own craft shop one day. Everything seemed perfect for their little family, but the existence of Bob's best friend, Roger Brower, bothered Liana. They had been friends since middle school, but Liana didn't like Roger because he was involved with drugs, and she was worried he would be a bad influence on Bob. Liana told Bob she didn't approve of Roger, but Bob didn't listen and continued to be friends with him. Liana realized she couldn't change their relationship, so she stopped complaining and let them be friends. Years passed, and they celebrated Eric's 5th birthday. A few days later, on August 10th, 1996, they planned a family outing to a bay along the river in Sweetwater County. However, what they don't know is that this fun trip will tragically end the lives of two innocent people. Lieutenant Kevin Alphister from the Sweetwater County Sheriff's Department was on patrol that day when he received a call from dispatch. Someone had called 911 reporting that his wife and child had fallen off a cliff. The call came from the Lost Dog Road, a dusty trail in the desert leading up to a cliff. The officer rushed to the scene. When Lieutenant Alphister arrived at the cliff, he saw something awful. Liana and her son Eric were lying lifeless at the bottom. Their bodies looked twisted and broken among the rocks. Lieutenant Alphister soon realized that they must have fallen 200 feet down from the top of the cliff. Sadly, Bob Duke was also there to witness the horrifying scene. Afterward, Lieutenant Alphister asked Bob what happened. Bob said they had gone for a drive and stopped at a few places before reaching the cliff. They stopped on a ridge where Eric was playing with his mom, throwing rocks and chasing lizards. Bob went to the car to get a soda, and when he turned back, Liana and Eric were gone. However, Lieutenant Alvarez noticed that Bob seemed calm as he told the story, which made him suspicious. Usually, someone who just lost their family would be more upset. Bob said the cliff was too steep for him to go down and check on them, but he could hear Eric choking on blood. The first responders arrived and went down to check on Liana and Eric. Lieutenant Alvister noticed they did it easily, even though Bob said it was too hard. This made him wonder why Bob chose to park in such a risky place if he had never been there before. Also, when they brought Liana and Eric's body up the cliff, Bob didn't react much. Usually people in grief would reach out to their loved ones, but Bob didn't. This made Lieutenant Alvester even more suspicious, and he hoped an investigation would clear things up. The sad news quickly spread across the small town of Green River, where detectives started their investigation while the town mourned the deaths of Liana and Eric. They questioned the family and friends of the victims, including Bob, the grieving husband. Even though most people in town and the police officers believed Bob couldn't have been involved in his wife and child's deaths, the detectives kept investigating. They wanted to be sure they didn't miss anything. As they looked into it, they couldn't find any evidence that suggested someone had hurt Liana and Eric. The reports from the doctors also said they likely died from falling, and there wasn't any sign that someone had hurt them. With no new clues, the detectives couldn't solve the case, and eventually they stopped investigating. They thought maybe Liana and Eric's deaths really were just an accident. After some time, Bob was no longer a suspect, and their deaths were stated to be accidental. Even though a few detectives still thought there might be something more to it, the sheriff's department said it was just a tragic accident and closed the case. Liana and Eric's funerals were held, and many people came to pay their respects. Bob, too, was there to carry Eric's coffin. Liana and Eric were both buried together in a cemetery overlooking the town. In 1998, Bob moved to Austin, Texas, to live with his brother Mike as he prepared to start a new life. However, a detective named Mon Meekin couldn't stop thinking about the case. Even though the sheriff's department said it was over, he felt something wasn't right. He believed there were too many strange things about what happened. Even though it had been a long time since Liana and Eric died, Detective Meekin kept digging for answers. Finally, after 2.5 years, he found something that helped him understand what really happened. On January 4th, 1999, Detective Meekin got a frantic call from Roger. Roger was scared and kept saying someone was going to kill him. Meekin tried to find out who was after Roger, but Roger couldn't give a clear answer. Eventually, Meekin calmed Roger down, and Roger said he needed to talk to Meekin urgently because he had something really scary to say. Meekin drove to the construction site where Roger worked, and once there, Roger got into the police car and told Meekin a disturbing story. Roger said his old friend Bob Duke had been calling him from Houston. At first, it was just normal talk about work, but then Bob started asking Roger for a big favor. Bob wanted Roger to get him a gun because he was working in a security building and said some people wanted him dead, adding that he could also make money from it. Roger stated that he didn't want anything to do with it, but he went along with it because he felt pressured. Roger continued to tell Meekin about another conversation he had with Bob a few weeks later. Bob mentioned he had spent the insurance money from his wife and child's deaths, and that he and his brother had a plan to make a lot of money quickly. Bob then asked Roger to help him kill his parents, offering $20,000. Roger was shocked but reluctantly agreed. Then Roger recalled another conversation he had with Bob back in July 1996. Bob had asked Roger if he would kill his wife and child for $115,000. Roger thought Bob was joking, but realized he was serious when Bob came back with a detailed plan a few days later. Bob wanted Roger to shoot him in the arm, then shoot his wife and child, and finally shoot some neighborhood kids to make it look like an accident. Roger was horrified and refused, but Bob kept insisting. After hearing Roger's story, Detective Meekin was stunned. Finally, the person he had been investigating for almost 3 years is now right under his nose. Without hesitation, Meekin started a thorough investigation into Bob Duke. James Robert Duke was born in 1973 to Larry and Roberta Duke, who were both school teachers. He grew up in Green River with his older brother Mike Duke in a little red house on Bridger Street. James, also known as Bob, was a smart kid who did well in school. In 7th grade, he became best friends with Roger Berger after getting into a fight with him. They did lots of things together, like driving Bob's truck off-road, chasing girls, drinking beer, and watching horror movies. After high school, Bob fell in love with Liana Davidson and got her pregnant. He had plans to go to college, but he put them on hold to take care of his new family. Bob worked hard as a carpet layer and became well known in Sweetwater County for his diligence. Despite being described as a good husband and father, Bob felt trapped in his marriage and started looking for a way out. First, he asked Roger to help him kill his family for $20,000, but Roger declined his offer, which made him resort to doing it himself and make it look like an accident. After Roger's statements, Detective Meekin got the FBI involved, and they managed to record a conversation where Bob talked about killing his parents for insurance money. Bob and his brother Mike were arrested, and they later pleaded guilty to attempting to kill their parents. Despite their parents' refusal to believe that their sons had been planning to kill them, Bob and Mike were found guilty. While they were in prison, Detective Meekin reopened the case and charged Bob with the murders of Liana and their child. Bob's trial started in 2002, and the prosecutor had to work hard to convince the jury that Bob was guilty. They took the jury to the cliff, where Liana and their child died, showing it wasn't a safe place for a family outing, but a deadly trap set by Bob. Roger testified against Bob, but the defense lawyer, Taylor, tried to discredit him because of his past involvement with drugs. Taylor told the jurors that the prosecutor, Moneyhun, just wanted to win the case, even though there were no eyewitnesses. He said Moneyhun relied on a witness who wasn't there and had a criminal past, so he wasn't believable. Moneyhun tried to discredit Bob's story, showing that Bob had told several contradicting stories about what happened at the cliff. He also brought in a professor who said there was no evidence the cliff had crumbled in 1996. Moneyhun also said it was strange that Bob said he couldn't go down the cliff, but the first responders could. He also mentioned the fact that Bob didn't act like someone who was grieving at the time of the incident, but all kept saying was that he didn't do anything wrong and that his family just got lost and fell by accident. During the trial, the prosecutors and the defense argued a lot, but it was hard for the prosecutors to prove Bob was guilty. Then, a woman named Crystal Robinson came forward. She had a relationship with Bob when she was just 13. She said Bob wanted out of his marriage and didn't want to pay child support. Her testimony helped the jury understand why Bob might have killed his family. After 8 hours, the jury found Bob guilty of all charges. He was sentenced to life in prison on September 25, 2002. Liana's parents were happy with the verdict and thanked Roger for coming forward. Bob is currently serving his time in Wyoming State Prison. So guys, what do you think about this case? Do you believe Bob pushed his family, or do you think he's innocent? Let us know what you guys think in the comments section below. If you have any other cases you wanted us to talk about, tell us below. Stay safe, and thank you for watching.